Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Sly, and I'm a librarian at the University of Maryland, College Park, working primarily out of the McKeldin Library in normal circumstances. Speaking of normal circumstances, I apologize for this video coming to you a little bit late. A lot of technical difficulties relating to remote learning and working at home and all of this. So apologies. I'm going to switch here in just a second to more of a slideshow presentation, and that you can reach out to me at any time with questions about this or other courses that you may have questions about. As I'll show you in just a moment, there are a whole host of librarians who are here to help you. I'm one of a whole team of people who is here to help you with your courses. So please do reach out to us. My email is in the slide below there, and I'll drop in a little text here as well. But please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll also show you another way to get in touch with me that might even be a little bit easier for both of us. So with that, I'm going to switch to a slideshow presentation. Okay, so here we are. So what we're going to be doing today, let me bring up the outline here. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to do a quick tour of the website so you can get a sort of scope of our people and services and sort of the important places to look for things there and where to go. But more importantly, we're going to be looking at developing a research question, which is one of the fundamental pivots in how to think about doing your research. Developing a series of questions that kind of help you analyze your topic in a more thoughtful and fulsome way. These are the types of things we're going to be working on here. I'm going to be giving an example. And if we were in person and we could be working together, I think we would be doing a lot more sort of back and forth and working with your specific examples, which in a lot of ways is more helpful. So this is another chance to let you know that that's the kind of work that we can do if you send me an email. We set up an appointment. We can work through your specific topic, doing some of the work that I'm going to outline here. So as a component of doing that, we're going to look at the research cycle. Now the research cycle is a sort of project management tool that I like to use to help understand how to think of these questions and to think of research in an iterative and comprehensive way. This will help us in our search in that we'll be able to search more effectively and efficiently, meaning that we won't have to kind of hunt and peck and browse through useless results. If we choose the right terms by developing good keywords and subjects and things like this, we start to understand how to actually search correctly. So we'll do that together as well. And what we'll do is we'll put all this together to find some material. And I'll kind of highlight the steps and the practical elements of how to find this material as we go. Okay, so our first step here is just to think about what the research cycle is. Now the research cycle, as I mentioned, is a project management tool effectively. Now this is one that I designed. There are other versions of this, but this is the one that I like to use, and I put this together in this way on purpose to kind of help illustrate two things. One, that research is iterative, meaning that it has a beginning and an end and a beginning again, right? When you are researching, you're putting your topic through a sort of questionnaire process that takes more than one pass through. So in the beginning, you can see our starting point here. That's where we start to understand the need and the scope of what we're looking for, which I'll explain all this in more detail. Build on our prior knowledge, come up with research questions, try to find the heart of the problem that we're trying to address, as that might be different from the way we're expressing it. That's an important little trick that we'll kind of get to here. We'll look at rephrasing, understanding where sort of basic searching like Wikipedia and Google come into this and how to use those as an effective tool in your larger process. So not as a stopping point, but as an early step. How to develop keywords and synonyms. Then how to do the more targeted searching, which involves the library resources. How to kind of revise and go back through this. That we're going to focus primarily on this first third. That's the sort of searching process that brings you to the next steps. The next steps are what you do more on your own. And these are things that I can help you with, your professor can help you with, and they're sort of the next steps that we don't have time to cover today. But these are the steps of analysis, sort of reading through, analyzing a resource, and synthesizing it to understand where it fits within the larger research world. So this is where you understand the research that you're looking at. Then that moves into the next third, the final third of our first step of the research process. And this is where we kind of take a meta-analysis of what it is that we found and place it into the larger context and kind of take the component parts of it apart and try to build our second stage of our search. So the point through this is that as you go through the research cycle, you're continually building, honing, shaping, and reforming your search into a more sophisticated one. Each time you go through the research cycle, your topic will develop further and deeper into something far more interesting than where you started. So that's our sort of basic primer on that. We're going to now take a little pause and go into the library's space, our library website, lib.umd.edu. Okay, so here we are on the main library's website. This is again lib.umd.edu. There's a lot going on here, as you can see, a lot of like pop-ups and so on and so forth. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. I think it's more important that we go through some of the research notions, but I just want to point out a couple of things as they relate to sort of our pandemic openings and things like this, right? So what you'll need to know is that, for example, McKeldin Library is open right now at a limited capacity for on the first floor for sort of study appointments and things. You can make an appointment by clicking here. And here is a listing of sort of what you can do. We're only open Monday through Friday, 9 to 7. And when you're there, there are a couple of study spaces. If you do need some study space to get out of your dorm or something like this, it's understandable. I feel the same way. Here's some places to work and things. You can reserve a computer if it's needed. You can also use our one-button studio, which is where you can record for a class or something like this. And it allows you to easily save and send a quick video file and stuff like this. So that's helpful if you don't have those capabilities on your computer. I know, as I've explained, sometimes even if you have the capabilities on your own computer, you have a lot of technical difficulties. So hopefully that can be helpful. We're in phase 3 right now of our reopening schedule, which you can find more information about up here. We're in phase 3 as of the 14th, and what that is Monday. And what that effectively means is that we have limited services, but we are in the process of reopening towards more. So we have some, as I said, study spaces and things available. We have the copiers that you can use on the main floor, stuff like that. But we're still not open to regular capacity. And as one of our main components of things that we don't have is regular lending right now. Additionally, things like the tech office there that's in the library where you may have purchased your computer or something like that, that is currently closed, as is the Footnotes Cafe, the coffee shop there in McKeldin is also closed at the moment. So, we're not open to our normal capacity. We don't have browsable stacks, the bookshelves that go up and down the building up until the 6th floor. These are not, I've been away so long, I forgot how many floors the library has. These aren't available. What we do is through our curbside pickup, we have staff members who go through and get the books for you and deliver them to you outside. This is not ideal, I know, but it is our current situation. Let me just explain quickly about the curbside pickup. So normally, you can go to the library services desk and check out your book there with your university ID. That just like any other library, public library, etc. That's the main way of checking out books. You will have gone through, picked it up through the stacks and brought it down. Now we're doing our curbside. Here's just a quick little overview of some of the curbside services and our hours for that, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's very limited, I know, but it's, again, for safety at the moment. What this effectively means is you will go through and request an item in the catalog. If you haven't used our catalog, I'll show you that here in a few minutes, and I'll highlight how to do curbside when we actually look at a record. But what it will do is it will say request item when you get to it. So you search for a book. and it will bring up the request item page, and that's where you hit request item, and then it'll bring you to UMCP curbside pickup. I'll show you all of this. What then happens is you'll get an email that asks you to schedule your pickup time to pick up your material. And then you'll need to bring your university ID with you. You'll have to be wearing a mask in order to pick up the materials. And of course, you will have gone through your university guidelines for being on campus, as you've gotten information about elsewhere. If you have questions on any of that, please let me know. I'm happy to walk you through this more carefully, but for the time being, we're going to keep moving. The location of the curbside pickup is the side of McKeldin, right? So here's the big McKeldin Library. This is the main entrance of the campus, or to the library, which you may have gone through on a tour or in a previous semester, something like this, or if you're just familiar with the campus, you'll have gone through here. This is the Testudo statue, for example, and then the little steps down into the mall. So this is the mall to get some orientation. The mall, Testudo, main entrance. Over here is where the curbside pickup location is. And to get sort of some bearings of where this is, Jimenez Hall, for example, is right here. And the language house and so forth is over here. So that's just to kind of help orient. And here's a picture even we can so here's the side of the building. This is where the curbside is in this little hallway, sketchy little alley here. If we zoom out, it's a little easier to get your bearings. As you can see, we're coming down this little library lane that comes from Stamp, right? So here's Jimenez, Stamp Student Union's right up here, right? So here's this little walkway here down into the McKeldin Library pickup, which is right here, right? So again, Jimenez, Student Union, that gives you some. So the parking lot, if you're driving in, one of the visitor lots is here, and so on. Language house and all. Anne Arundel is over here. So just to give you some sense of where you go. I want to now show you a couple of other places to look here before we actually get to the main meat of the library's website that is most important. I just want to show you a couple of other quick things. I mentioned in my sort of preamble that I'm one of many librarians that can help you. It's important to know that the whole team is here and that we cover so many different subjects, and that we can help you in all of these different areas. It's important to know. It's important to know as you set up your semesters and all. So I wanted to show you how to get in touch with us, me and the others. If you go to Help, Meet Your Subject Specialist here, and then click on the Subject Specialist directory. Once you're in here, you'll get a listing of all of our smiling faces, but more importantly, you want to go to Subject. And in here, you'll see all of the different subjects laid out pretty much as if they are in Testudo, right? These align pretty carefully with the catalog offerings for the courses that we have. So these are the subject librarians for these particular areas. So let's say if you're taking a course in African American Studies, you'll meet with my colleague Tahira. If you're taking an American Studies course, for example, you'll meet with my colleague Eric. And if you're taking an anthropology course, you'll meet with me. What I want to show, however, is not only just the names and emails, but if you click on one of our names, you have this option to schedule a consultation. This is a really good way of getting in touch with us. It's worth knowing our email and to some extent our phone number. Those are office phones, and our location, our office location. But probably even more important is knowing that we have this schedule a consultation button. If you click on that, you'll get this little pop-up here that allows you to schedule a meeting with me when I'm available. So here are the remaining days of September. So few days of September left, my goodness. And say you wanted to meet with me tomorrow. I'm available to meet tomorrow, it looks like, at either 7 a.m. or 1:30 p.m. So if I say 1:30 p.m., what will happen is you'll enter in your information here. You'll give me the way that you prefer to meet, whether it's Zoom or Google Hangouts. Answer a few little questions here, what class it's for, some of the aspects of your question, what you want to be doing. If you have something you want to upload, you're welcome to do that. Maybe you have an assignment you want me to look at to help with, or something like this, and I'll do that. What this does then, very helpfully for both of us, is it then puts it directly on my calendar. So then later this afternoon, whenever you make that appointment, it'll pop up on my phone. It'll pop up on my computer. It'll say you have an appointment with X student. And okay, guess at 1:30 I'm meeting with the student, and I'll make sure to send you a Zoom link or a Google Hangouts invitation, and we'll go from there, and we'll have our meeting. In these meetings, we can talk about any number of things that having to do with your project and your research or your interests, questions, problems, so on and so forth. Librarians are really here to help, and we're here to help you improve your grade in every course that you're in, and can answer questions that you may not want to ask your professors. This actually happens kind of a lot. I'll get students coming into my office who kind of don't want to admit that they don't know something to their professor, and they can come to me and we can work through those questions with no sort of penalty. I mean, your professors in general would rather you ask questions than not know something. So in general, I wouldn't worry about that too much. But if you would feel more comfortable coming to me to ask questions, we can work through those things without any penalty. I'm not going to rat you out to your professors or anything like that. So we're here to help. We're here to improve your grades. We have only a positive impact on your grades. We can help you with research in ways that I'm going to go through here momentarily, help you get over those research hurdles. I'd say that's probably the thing that I help with the most. Students come in and say something like, I just don't know how to, there's nothing on my topic. I can't find any research on it. And that's usually not true. Occasionally, there's a few things if it's a very, very recent topic. For example, if you were looking to connect, global terrorism and TikTok or something, there's probably going to be some work on that developing. There's probably going to be some white papers. There may be some journalism, but actual academic writing probably won't exist on that exactly as phrased. So we would work to rephrase your questions, to maybe hone your topic a little bit, to maybe look at social media and global terrorism a little more broadly, and to kind of develop that into something that we can actually work with. So those are the types of hurdles that we often kind of work on together to push your paper towards the goalposts. Okay, so let me go back here. So we talked about the people. I think most importantly, for the moment, things to know are just where it is that you're going to be searching, and the terminology that we use for these things. So this main search box is known alternatively as either WorldCat, the catalog, the library, or sometimes ResearchPort, depending on who your professor is and how long they've been at Maryland. It used to be called ResearchPort, for example. Other people have recently been calling it Bento, which is our new search tool. So it really just depends on who's talking. But those various terms mean this. Now, this is our basic search. This searches, as it says here, books, journals, articles, media, and more. Another way of phrasing this is that it searches everything that we not only own physically, the things that actually sit on our shelves or sit on our servers as stuff that we have access to, media and so forth, but it's everything we have access to even in our broader networks, right? So not only the things that we physically own, but things that are owned by our partner institutions that we can access through interlibrary loan, and stuff like our UBorrow service, which comes through the Big Ten. So we have access directly to other Big Ten schools, as well as other schools within Maryland, our USMAI system. And these schools allow us to borrow materials for longer loan periods and at a greater rate. So these partnerships really help in our ability to get material. Okay. Let's look here at WorldCat just for a moment. This is our general search, and it's tempting to want to just throw in a bunch of terms here to search for something, but I would really advise using this advanced search function, and I'll show you why. As you open it up, things become a little bit clearer about how the search actually works in WorldCat. In particular, you get the notion of where your words are being applied. So the general search out here on the main library's page, when you search in here, you're searching this bar, you're searching this keyword and the term. And keywords are great, and we're going to come back to keywords here in a moment about how to develop them and things like this. But essentially, what you're searching for when you're searching here is sort of any time the term is used within the record. And in the big catalog, that can give you a lot of kind of mixed results, because anytime a word is used within the record, it will pop up, whether or not it has direct importance to that material or not. So the specificity of your word will indicate your success in this. And we're going to kind of put a pin there for the moment, and I'll show you this in practical terms in a moment. So that's the keywords. You can see also, you can search by subject. You can search by title, right? These things allow you to kind of narrow down, all of these different elements allow you to narrow down your search into something more specific. And this really helps. If you're looking for a journal, a particular journal, right? We're going to stick with our global terrorism just for the moment here. But if you're looking for current affairs or the journal Global Terrorism or something like this, you can search directly for this here, which is helpful. If you're looking for a particular author, you can search for their name here, and that's also particularly helpful. As an example of this, if I were to type in Hemingway here, I will, as the author, I will get back searches about Hemingway as the author, right? So I'll get books like Old Man and the Sea and For Whom the Bell Tolls and all of this, right? If I were to search Hemingway, but as a subject, I would get, sort of Hemingway studies, books about American literature in the 20th century and so forth. If I were to search Hemingway as a keyword, I might still get books about and by Hemingway, but in a broader sense. It won't necessarily be Hemingway studies. It'll be things that mention Hemingway or use him as a sort of tag. An important note about what keywords are is they essentially function like tags. And I'll come back to that here in just a moment. Okay. So that's the basics of the catalog. I'm not going to go into more depth just now. I'll show you when we actually look for particular books when we come back with our keyword searches here in just a moment. The other place to look is our databases tab. So when you search in here, you are searching in this databases tab as well. As I said, this searches everything, which is both good and bad. It can give you an overwhelming amount of results, and I'll show you how to narrow those down. But if you look in the databases tab, you can be more specific about where it is you're searching. So as you can see, these are broken down into subjects, just like Testudo and the subject librarians and everything. This is how our library is overall organized, is into these little brackets. And if I go into one of the brackets, what you'll see is, think of these as like a container. So I'm in the psychology container here. And now these databases that are highlighted here are what we term to be best bets. So all of the different subjects have some associated best bets within them. And so these give you kind of the window, the best way into that discipline as we see it. You're probably going to find what you're looking for in one of these. But we also have associated databases and things. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that for most topics, they're going to be in some way multidisciplinary, right? Disciplines are subjects, right? These are the schools and the topics and courses and things. English studies is a discipline, or government and politics is a discipline. So a lot of studies are going to be multidisciplinary, meaning that they skip along multiple different areas of study and research. So being creative and thinking about where your topic might fall within these databases is another critical searching skill when thinking about any resources. If you're just generally browsing and you don't yet know what discipline you're interested in looking in, using this main search will probably get you what it is that you're looking for. Okay, so that's the basic overview of the website. Basic sketch, right? This website is a little bit confusing, so I think it's best if you take some time on your own to explore a little bit. You'll find that we have a chat function. If you have basic questions, it pops up as it's been doing the whole time we've been talking, whether you want it to or not. You can chat here very easily. You can also use this Ask Us button to send an email sort of to the libraries, and it will come to everybody, and whoever has the best answer will be able to answer you, and that sort of a thing. So that's the sort of basic overview. I would spend some time getting acquainted with the library now, so that you don't have to spend time later in the semester plugging through stuff and trying to hunt and peck through various places. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to our slideshow here. Okay, so now we're back in our slideshow here, and what we're going to be doing now is really working on honing some research questions and brainstorming a topic. We're going to be working on developing the heart of the problem and looking at keywords and synonyms most specifically. Developing the heart of the problem is really one of the crucial stages in putting together a research project. I teach courses here at University of Maryland as well, and so I have a lot of experience working with students on both sides of developing research ideas, both as a librarian, helping students sort of one-on-one, working with their professors to work out a topic, and also working with my students to kind of dig in and really kind of work through research ideas. And I know how tough it can be for both, professors, for librarians, and for students to really all kind of come up with the same idea, right? To kind of have the same notion of where to go for a research project. And so what I want to kind of work through with this is the main concept of finding the heart of the idea is to work through your own sort of language and ambiguities of language and stuff to really get to where it is you're going with your topic. Now, an example would be if your professor asked you to write her an email saying, what are you going to be writing your main paper about this semester? And you send something like, what is the impact of globalization on Africa? Or put another way, the impact of globalization on Africa, right? Like if you just sort of said that. Well, that's good, right? At least there's sort of something there. But the professor will kind of push back a little bit and say, well, we need to be a lot more specific about this. This is kind of a big fuzzy topic. So, let's hone in on our particular elements that we're interested in. Let's really develop the heart of the problem, right? So we're going to take these pieces apart and really look to kind of think about them in more depth to get not only sort of more research on each thing, but to get to what we're really talking about. Because chances are, if we say the globalization of Africa, or on the impact of globalization on Africa, what we mean something specific in our mind. We just maybe not able to articulate it just yet. So we're going to work through this problem to kind of give us a little bit more depth. That's the goal here. The more depth we have, the better each time we go through our research cycle and our iterations, the more sophisticated each time we're going to be, and the more depth and specificity we're able to give. So let's take these things apart. Okay, so we have our main concepts here: impact, globalization, and Africa. So let's think about the main ideas. And we're going to develop the heart of the problem, like I said. Got a little ahead of my slides. So terms like impact can be overly vague and meaningless. So what do we do with it? What can we really actually mean by impact? So that's one of the things we're going to be kind of taking apart here. What does impact mean, right? So maybe we need to know first what globalization means in our context. We need to know about some places that we're going to be talking about specifically geographically, region-wise, whatever it is that we're going to kind of zoom into. We need to know a little bit more about this. Then we need to know about what our impact actually means. Are we talking economic impact? Are we talking supply chain? What are we talking about? Religious? Is there violence? What is our impact? There's a lot of questions here. Okay, so globalization. Well, that's a big term. And it means a lot of different things in a lot of different contexts. So we need to be more accurate, right? We need to talk specifically about what it is and where we're going. And we're going to think about what associated disciplines we need to work with to get there, right? So if we're thinking economically, we need to think about, okay, what are the sources that I can find on global economics and how globalization of a particular process, so maybe the taking over of an industry, something like this, what are the knock-on effects both in an economic, maybe in a cultural way, maybe in a social way? What are the things that I can start to kind of piece together based on some factor? And of course, Africa is huge, and Africa is a continent, and Africa has a lot of different people, places, and things inside of it, with vast regions and huge differences in each one. Each country has language differences, has a different history, has its its own indigenous history as well as colonial history for most of Africa, so on and so forth. Right? Each has its own effects based on climate and climate change. It has its own economic situation. Some countries are very rich, some are very poor. And what does this mean in its own context? And if we're also able to replace Africa with maybe not even countries, but region-wise, and maybe we mean North Africa and the Middle East, maybe we mean Sub-Saharan Africa and we really mean Congo, maybe we mean Southern Africa but we really mean Zimbabwe. These are the kinds of questions we have to come to, each one of course having a very different varied history, varied economic situation, etc. We also want to test our own assumptions here. And we need to kind of try to figure out where our assumptions are both coming from and how we can address them, and to not take things at our own word to that. And we need to start expanding about where we can learn more. What are the main, in that first phase of the research cycle, where we're kind of in an information gathering phase, where's a good place to get information about this? Which, I know is sort of why we're here. But starting to kind of think and note, places like the CIA World Factbook, but then also noting that source and understanding what the biases may be and that sort of a thing. And so we're going to be looking at how to specify, or when to specify and when to stay broad. Sometimes it's better to stay broad and to look at North Africa. Sometimes it's better to focus on Algeria or Tunisia or something like this, as opposed to North Africa. So we'll kind of look into these ideas. Okay. Let's take a second pass then. Okay, we still have our main idea here, globalization, the impact on Africa. All right, let's build this out. So let's think about, in this example, Eastern Africa. Think about the important geographic features of the region, right? Horn of Africa. We have our sort of, main areas of countries. We have, to the north, we have Ethiopia. In the center, we have Somalian Republic. We have Sudan. We have Kenya. We have Uganda. We have a whole region here to talk about. And so we need to think about, so what do we mean by Eastern Africa? Do we mean the northern parts, Egypt and so forth? Are we talking about the central? These are the countries I just mentioned. We're talking about southern Eastern Africa, which includes South Africa and Zimbabwe and so on. We need to think about the colonial factors here. We need to think about the prosperous countries in the region, the poorest countries in the region, and what this means. Okay, so we talked about that a bit. Same thing here. We can kind of narrow down. So what this process is doing is kind of isolating our questions a little bit and kind of putting them into a new perspective. So globalization. So we can figure out what the most notable metric of the global factor in the region is. So we're talking about trade. Our staple industries uprooted, that sort of a thing. We can look at religion. That's a big one. And how powerful religion is in the society. Now, I'm saying this as a historian of religion, so religion may have an outpaced position in my mind for this, but it has a lot of importance in global politics here. And of course, colonization come back and again. Okay, and then back to impact, cause and effect. What are we really talking about here? We're talking about economics, environmental, cultural. What are these changes, political changes, and how these things work? And the inclusion in international unions such as the African National Congress, the UN, other organizations there, other NGOs, non-governmental organizations involved, that sort of thing. So these are some of the central questions that I can come up with directly out of my main three terms here. Now, here is our question about Africa. So let's build this out. Again, we're kind of working backwards a little bit through our sentence because each one needs a definition. And impact we won't really know until we figure out these other two. So I'm going to focus on Somalia. And this is in Central Eastern Africa, the Horn of Africa. And it has a very interesting history and a very interesting present. And so as I kind of think about Somalia, I can write down some of the stuff that I know. right? So I know that it's a former British colony. It was Somaliland under the British. It was also an Italian colony. Um, it was Italian Somaliland. And that the colonial era for Somalia ended basically in the 1960s. There's more details there. We don't need to concern ourselves at this moment. I know some aspects about the sort of post-colonial period and what that meant, and the sort of state of the country through most of the 90s and 2000s. For those of you familiar with Somalia in this period, it was an unstable country, and there were a number of various problems, including essentially a failed state, which we can get into. But we have intervention by neighboring countries such as Ethiopia and Kenya, and we have a lot of relief efforts by the UN and other groups, both NGOs and sort of PANGOs. We have the formation of various governments and government organizations in Somalia with very sort of state-backed and neighboring state-backed groups. But we also know some other facts about Somalia, such as the fisheries were disrupted by this political instability. So I'm gonna kind of focus on that a little bit, because the disruption of a particular industry really affects the overall economic situation that country exists within. So going from both being a mineral-rich region, which it is, and one that had a thriving sort of fishing trade during the colonial era, and its position in the Indian Ocean, which places it, the Horn of Africa sticks into the Indian Ocean and connects it to what was it once called the Shirazi Trade Network during the sort of height of the Ottoman Empire. But the main idea here being that it has connections to both the sort of the Far East networks as well as the Middle Eastern or Near Eastern networks. So it is well positioned as a global trading hub throughout. So the disruption to that has led to many issues. So long-term war and instability have led to countries no longer relying on this as a fishing port, for example. Okay, this speaks to a lot of our aspects of globalization. You have both global intervention, during the Somaliland colonial period, but then you have the removal of that intervention and the intervention more of the other countries in the region, such as Ethiopia and Kenya. Now there have been, as I mentioned, a lot of attempts at various governments throughout the 90s, but more in the 2000s, and so this has some aspect of globalization as they were attempting to kind of fit themselves more into the at least the Pan-African global economy and how that relates out to trade. But there were a lot of challenges, such as no formal banking structure, which led to a lot of small-scale money transfers, which is still an ongoing issue in Somalia, which issues like that keep international investments rather low. Additionally, there is a low telecom establishment in Somalia, meaning that it's difficult for people to start any kind of international trade. It's just plain difficult. So we have these aspects of globalization and the inability in a lot of ways for Somalis to enter the globalized trading world. This in and of itself is an effect of globalization, right? So we have this term globalization. We can look at it in two ways, pull it into two different directions. This then brings us to the notion of impact. And I think we've already kind of established some of the main impacts. The removal of trade, of a very important trading network, and a commodity directly tied to the region, both minerals and fish. And so this helps us kind of understand the impact. We can also start to piece together aspects of what the region has gone through, and that can help us understand the impacts of colonialism, the impacts of local government interactions with Somalia, meaning Ethiopia and Kenya, and how that worked to sort of form in a global model, and that's sort of the key here, to form in a global model aspects of the globalized Somalia. So these are the things that kind of create our impact, right? So now we can really form a question that is a little bit more sophisticated. We know just in specific terms, we're talking about Somalia. We know that we're talking about the impact of shipping and trade and how it moved away from the Horn of Africa, despite its prime location in the trading network, and the political instability that has led to aspects of lacking in global trade or investment, despite its real natural resources, human impact being deep there. And all of these things have an impact on what we're going to be talking about, which is the rise of piracy and terrorism, right? A state devoid of economic opportunity breeds trouble. And there's a lot of religious elements here too, but that's a much deeper conversation, and it's maybe one of the further iterations of the research cycle to get into, one that, if done in such a cursory way here, wouldn't do justice to the depth of the situation. So we're going to kind of deal with some of these main cursory issues, and the idea would be in future iterations of the research process, we would dig into those other additional cultural and religious elements. Okay, so research questions. So just out of these things, I have a number of questions that start to come up, right? What is the lack of telecom industry? What does the lack of telecom industry mean for the people of Somalia? Well, okay, so we have issues of internet access. This is something we can look into. Education. So what does the education system look like if it's not globally connected as the rest of us are now? What are the issues of finance? We already talked about aspects of it, low outside international intervention or investment based primarily on issues of telecom and banking and things like this. And how does the lack of telecom really play into aid? Or really, I can add even another question. How has the lack of, or the low infrastructure for telecom, rather than even saying the lack of infrastructure, but the low infrastructure, led to other types of trade, right? So we talked a little bit about the idea of small investment or lending programs. These are mobile. These are things that people do on their phones. So what are the rise of the apps that surround, developing nations like this, where stepping in where people don't have a laptop, but they have a sort of rudimentary cell phone or something like this? What are the apps that are developed for that to help people both communicate and trade and work within a financial system and so forth? So another question would be relating to globalism here. What did the shift in global trade away from the port cities of Somalia and did it have a role in the rise of piracy in the Indian Ocean? Well, what does piracy mean in the modern age? So we can ask questions about that. What are the targets of piracy? Is piracy the same thing as terrorism? What are the goals of the pirates of Somalia? Who are the people involved in piracy? This is another important question to consider. What is the history of piracy in Somalia? Did it come pretty much right after the breakup of the British Empire? Did it come more at the end of the period of authoritarianism? Is it a product of the failed political system, that sort of a thing? And frankly, is there a connection between these pirates and the fishing communities? What is that? That's something that's worth looking into. And then, of course, what is the role of Somalia's regional partners in the formation of the current government? Why do Ethiopia and Kenya and more recently Southern Sudan, South Sudan, and so forth, what are their interests in Somalia? Why do they care? What is the global impact here that we have? Or if nothing else, what is the continental impact here? And what are their financial interests in Somalia? Do they have any? What about these minerals? What about the mining? What about the fishing? What about the position in the Horn of Africa? What are their interests here? These are things to investigate. So, taking all of this into account, I can start to develop a better question than simply the impact of globalization on Africa. Now I can look at the long-term political, cultural, and financial effects of the withdrawal of the British and Italian colonial interests in Somalia and the ensuing political instability. It's still not perfect, right? But this gets me a lot closer to something that I can research and have direct, good sources on. Better. I can still work with these terms. These are still elements of definition. What do I mean by long-term? What do I mean by political? What do I mean by cultural? So on and so forth. And what do I mean by political instability? These are all questions that are worth continuing to ask, to not just kind of move past. So what's our next step then? Okay, so we've been talking about the research cycle a lot. What we want to do is we've kind of been working through, and we really discovered the heart of the problem, right? So we've been, moving along through each one of these steps, and we kind of have ID'd some scope. We've looked at our prior knowledge, right? That's kind of how we develop some of these questions. We've really worked through brainstorming and research. Oh, that's bad. We've really worked through research questions and brainstorming, and we've gotten to a much closer heart of the problem, right? Now what we really want to be doing is working through here for the moment. We want to kind of figure out how all of these things equal our... I'm going to stop drawing. That's ridiculous. All of these things equal what it is that we're really looking for. Okay, so what we want to do is take these central notions that we've been looking at and kind of honing into a research question and look at how to actually make them into something researchable. This is what's called keyword development. Okay, that's where we really want to hover here. So keywords are the common method for tagging articles and other information resources in databases and catalogs. Think of it like social media tagging, right? The idea is to associate one thing with another. For example, I forgot I put this slide in there. Sorry. It caught me off guard. If this was a picture that we were uploading to our Instagram for some reason, this is our friend Bill Worthington, and we wanted to take his picture and upload it to Instagram. We would tag his name, Bill Worthington, right? That's the way to associate it. So if people are looking for pictures of Bill Worthington, then they find our friend here. We could also tag it with something like rubber duckies. That way, if people are looking for rubber duckies, they find our boy, Bill Worthington. We could tag it with bath toys or bath, menswear. I'm going to assume this is Toledo, Ohio. I don't know why. It just seems very Ohioan out in here in the world. But so that's sort of how we can start to associate that. This has an analog directly with research. Just as we tagged this picture with things that we want to associate it with so that when people are searching for either Bill or for rubber duckies, they find this picture, the same thing applies with actual research, right? So if we have this article, which comes from the Journal of Contemporary African Studies, right? We have this Somalia and global terrorism, so on and so forth. We really want to focus here on these keywords, right? These are the words that the editor of this journal have told the author to kind of summarize their article with. So the author of this article, which is, 20-page research article, they write their 20 pages. Then the editor will tell them to please summarize it in about 150 words or so. That's this abstract right here. This gives you the summary of what this article is about and its conclusions. They then say, okay, great. Now that you've done 150 words, how about you give me, 5 to 10 words? These are the keywords, right? The keywords are very important. These are the ways that you would best describe this article. Just as these are terms that we would best describe this picture using, these are words that we would best describe this article as. So if I'm in there searching for keywords such as Somalia or jihad or terrorism, Al-Shabaab most importantly, the Ethiopian invasion of Somalia, U.S. foreign policy, so on and so forth, right? Or if I just search Somalia, this is the article that's going to come back, or one of many that's going to come back on this topic. These are my ways in. Now, the important thing about this to remember is that since this is the way that the author best described their article as, these are also the kinds of terms that you want to best describe your research question as. So as we take apart our research question here in a second, we're going to look to how to best describe what it is we're looking for. Again, the heart of the problem. These are the ways that we can best describe the research that we're trying to find using these few words. That way, we don't miss this out by using the wrong words. Easier said than done. Again, here's those keywords. Now, subjects, on the other hand, right? These are the larger topics of what's going into. This is like the containers, kind of like when we were looking at those databases and there was the subjects, and then within the subjects there was other things. Think of a subject kind of that way, right? In this sense. These are the larger containers. So we would maybe tag this as absurdist photography, bathing techniques, balanced meditation, who knows, right? These are the larger containers that we would then add our keywords into. This is how you find this in the catalog, right? So these are the higher level aspects that frame a particular subject. There's a lot of overlap between subjects and keywords, but the way to think about it is that these are the more formal and higher level concepts. So things like piracy, for example. Well, this is going to be piracy, kind of as you would generally think of piracy, sort of like the 17th, 18th century pirates in the Atlantic and that sort of thing in the Caribbean. But it also includes current pirates, both in the Indian Ocean and other places as well. And these are things like, politics and government. Well, this is very vague, right? So this is sort of not enough. These subjects get you the container, right? The bigger, broader picture. We want to search inside of politics and government. We don't want just politics and government. That's just sort of like the general place to look, and we want to build in. How you build with lines. So subjects give you the container to search within, and keywords are the specific terms within a work. Both are important, but the keywords are the way to really hone your topic. Okay, so now that we have that basic idea, we can move in to the next. One of the most important parts about doing any kind of library research is that knowing where to search is in some ways, at least in some stages of the research cycle, more important than searching the right terms. Like just looking in the right container will get you much closer to what it is you're looking for much faster than sort of knowing always exactly what to search. What will happen is, if we think about the research cycle, if we think about the research cycle, as we kind of move through these things, as I said before, we're getting more and more sophisticated. So if you're looking in the right space, let's say you're looking in a database on global policy, something like this, if you just type in Somalia, you're going to get more results than if you just generally type it in to a general database or something like this. You're going to get much closer just by looking in the right spot. Then your keywords can be developed from there. So as you're kind of working with the literature, if we think back even to this article that we're looking at, if we had just found this article just by a general search of Somalia or something like this, we're going to have a better understanding of each one of these terms after reading this article, and this will help us in our next stage of finding more research. We'll know where it is we want to isolate some of our terms. Okay. And so we want to start to build what our research world looks like, and I'll go into that here. And we want to kind of develop where we are in our overall process and think about it. So searching our different research world is important, and thinking about where we're searching is also important because it will determine what the kind of material is that we find. Google searches effectively the world, sort of. There's a lot of caveats there. Really, you're kind of pushed into a particular research world through Google, including things like Amazon or Wikipedia. The main idea with a lot of stuff with Google is getting you to a solution more than an exploration. And that's different than when you want to research. A solution approach gets you to a Wikipedia article. What's the problem with Somalia? You can find it here, right? But that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to ask some general questions. Google Scholar gives you sort of the research world, but it mixes in a lot of junk and a lot of good stuff all at once. So it's a little bit general and a little bit tough to get very specific in. There are tips and tricks to making this a little bit better that I hope we have time to go into. If not, it's something I can help you with on your own. Now, the library world is a good place to get started, and I know I'm a biased source on this. But the library is a curated source. It comes from our library and from the libraries around the world, collecting the material that is of higher quality overall. So in a lot of ways, you're in sort of better hands in general. It's not the only place to look, though, of course. And places like Google Scholar pretty much link in directly with libraries. So you're kind of doing both at the same time with Google Scholar. The difference is the sort of amount of stuff you'll have to pull through. Subject databases are the much more zoomed in research world, where you're looking not just at the research world or the world. You're looking at research within global terrorism world, right? So now, if you're in a database that looks at global terrorism and you type in Somalia, for example, you'll get a very specific set of articles and books and so forth, right? So the idea is, by the time you get down to these subject databases, you have to spend less time plowing through useless information because you're in a much more zoomed in version of the research environment. So if we go back to our new question, we can start to think about what are some of our keywords that we can come up with. So we're going to first pull out some basic ideas about colonialism, right? So we can start to ask some deep questions about British and Italian colonialism, and these then become keywords. If you think back, if I can quickly zoom back through some of these things, right? We look at these keywords. These are kind of expansive keywords. Oftentimes they're much shorter. Like the Ethiopian invasion of Somalia is a long keyword. But the basic idea is here we have these kind of phrases that come out of these larger concepts. Well, we can do something very similar as we look at something like British and Italian colonial interests, right? We can come up with these tags that give us a way into the research. So looking at the Dervish uprising, for example, or the Dervish movement for that matter, or from the other direction, looking at the Somaliland Camel Corps, specific people like Richard Corfield. You could look at any number of these different things, people associated with these different movements and whatever. And you start to get a sense of the sort of independence movements and the birth of some of the later terrorism movements and things coming out of the colonial era. If we take so we kind of looked at that, so we develop a short list of keywords, things that will get us into the research. Do the same thing then with long-term political and cultural financial effects, for example. Okay, well, we can start to think about what these things are and just start making note of them. So we have long-term political, cultural, and financial effects. Well, piracy, terrorism. The UN resolution of 1838 is one of the things that has a great deal of influence on the later formation of current Somalia and also the colonial era and all. We have these important people throughout, Abdullah Yusuf Ahmed. We have famine as a kind of long-term issue, with a lot of stems and branches that we can trace back. So we can start to think, okay, are these things connected? So what we want to do is literally connect them and zoom into our articles that way, right? So our first step would maybe to take something like mining and the colonial apparatus through British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland, right? Were there interests through mining? So then when we go back into our databases, and I'll show you this here in just a second, that's the kind of thing that we want to connect up using the AND function, the AND operator between these two ideas. In doing that, we're literally just connecting these two phrases. So the literature we're going to find, the stuff we're going to find that comes back, has to have these connections. It has to be about both mining, and it has to be about British Somaliland or British colonialization, something like that. Same applies if we were to look at terrorism and the Somali Republic or the Dervish uprising, right? We have to kind of put these things together to make that association. So we're telling the computer that we want our results to come back with these two things connected in the literature. If it's just about terrorism, we're not interested. If it's just about the Dervish uprising, we're not interested. We're looking for these connective elements. If we use the OR function, however, we're doing the exact opposite. In this example, we're saying terrorism, give me some information on terrorism or the Dervish uprising. We're looking for mining or British Somaliland. So it's more expansive. This would be maybe a way we can combine both. We would say mining and British Somaliland or Italian Somaliland, right? That would give us the combination of mining and these colonial powers. So it would give us information on either of those two colonial apparatuses and the connection to mining. Right. So as we move these things through, we're going to look at these ideas. Okay. So then that brings us back into, so we've developed some keywords, right? We've kind of thought these things through. We've figured out how to connect them together. Our next step then is to put it back into the databases through some targeted searching. To kind of go back 1 second then, where to kind of pull some of these keywords out. So I think one thing that may be kind of confusing through a lot of this is how to know what you don't know, and where to look for that information. Wikipedia, is a great source. It's something that I use every day as a general reference for where to get more information and how to build these searches. It gives you the information that you need to know to move on to the next step of the research cycle. So if we look here, we have the Wiki and Google searching here. That is a part of our process, right? To kind of do some work in Google and Wikipedia and stuff to get some basic ideas. We really, depending on the topic and how much we know, we really can't get to here without here, right? The keywords can often have to come from these sort of rudimentary searches in order to build and develop the better searches. So, look for the use of specific terminology in Wikipedia, people's names, things that are, important, the synonyms and the acronyms for political movements and for congresses and things like that. These are the types of things that you can then put back into terms like this, right? So that's particularly important. It's also worth looking at their further reading sections. Oftentimes there'll be a lot of books listed there that are worth looking at, or articles and things. The sources that are used in Wikipedia are sometimes a little bit more suspect. A lot of times people take the idea, students do this as well, of any old source that kind of says the thing that you're trying to say or whatever as kind of a source for it, and that's not exactly correct. So make sure to kind of quiz the sources and see where it is that they're coming from. And this is something we can talk about another time, perhaps. Okay. So again, now we're back into so we have some keywords developed out of Wikipedia. We can put it back into the library apparatus and try to find some better sources from there. That brings us effectively to the end of this first third, right? We're now going to move through the reading, analysis, synthesis. We're going to put these things all together, look at this sort of a meta view of each thing, and start again. Now when we get to IDing the scope and the prior knowledge and so on and so forth, as we get into these parts, the idea changes a little bit. We're going to have a more sophisticated understanding of all of those terms and things that we were looking for, right? Our question will become a little bit more targeted, and that's one of the main goals here. So as we move through these particular elements, we're going to find stuff that helps us push us in. We're going to now do a quick version of this on the library's website just to kind of show some of the practical elements here, and then that'll be it for our... Okay, so now that we've gone through all the hard work of piecing together what our ideas are for our particular research topic, thinking of some keywords, really working to find the heart of the issue for what our research is, I think a place that I want to start is by looking at Somali piracy. To me, that's very interesting, and that's genuine. It is an interesting topic to me. So I would be interested in reading more on this anyway. So let's use this as an excuse. What we're going to do, I think, that would be the best use of time would be to really explore the WorldCat and to figure out how to access resources through there in a kind of general way. As you'll see, if you go to the databases, things get very specific very quickly. And when you're first exploring a topic, it may not always be the best place to go to jump straight into all of this. We talked about the research worlds, and it can be very helpful once you know what you're looking for to be able to zoom in to a particular idea, particular notion and things that you're researching. But when you're just exploring, it may not always be the best way because it might be too specific too quickly. So with that in mind, if I looked in something like government and politics, you'll see that, this kind of has a very particular bent to it. I think something like international political science abstracts might be helpful. Things like this. Academic Search Ultimate is a general search, and we can kind of get at that for a moment. But you'll see through a lot of these are very, very specific. Even getting down to the CQ resources, which are designed primarily for members of Congress. and their staff and stuff like that. So their staff. So the idea behind these tend to be a bit concise, giving you sort of the basics of the debate, but not too much detail. And they tend to be a little less academic and a little bit more purpose-driven. And that's not really what we want. We want something that's kind of exploring ideas and notions a little bit more carefully. So let's go back out here, and we'll do our search in the databases here, or sorry, in the WorldCat catalog. Excuse me. And again, remember, this searches our books, journals, articles, media, and everything, not only held by the University of Maryland, but held by our partners in the country and outside. So this gives you a much broader sense of what is available to you, and it's very, very helpful for that. Let's do our advanced search like I was talking about before. Okay, so here now we're confronted with how we want to formulate this search. What are going to be our subjects and what are going to be our keywords? If I were in person with you all, this would be one of the sort of questions that I would ask of you, but in the sense of time, we're just going to kind of push forward. To my mind, I want to do a subject of Somalia, right? Now that's my bracket. That's my container. Now all the books, articles, etc. that I find are going to be within, at least to some degree, the subject of Somalia. That's helpful. That narrows down a vast collection of millions and millions of things to those things pertaining to Somalia. Okay, so now whatever I enter in next is going to have to do with Somalia in some way. So if I do a keyword, and I'm going to do piracy, like that. I might actually even add a row here. I'm going to do an or. I'm going to say pirate. And we can change these terms out too as we go here. And I'm going to do that as a keyword too. And we're going to do our last keyword here. I'm interested in the connection between the piracy and the fishing communities. I don't know what's there. I don't actually, legitimately, I don't know what the connections are. But I'm interested to know if there is one. It's something I want to explore. So I'm going to type in fishing. And let's just see what we get. Okay. So. Wow, this one feels very out of place. Wow, I'm not sure what that's doing there. My goodness, there's a lot of weird stuff in here. Okay, so with this first book here, we see this is pretty much on the nose, right? This looks pretty good. I want to kind of use this as two things. What I'm going to do with these results that come back is I'm going to show you not only the books that we have on this, also how to narrow down to the content type so you can look at articles and things like this. And then also I want to show you how to actually access this. So, and how to access other materials as well. So very quickly here, I mentioned the curbside pickup, right? So let's say we want this book. This looks pretty good. This would be a good place to start and to give us some insight into this whole idea. If I click on this, I see, okay, we have the book. It is available. So what I want to do is click on this request item button. And then I want to go down to University of Maryland, College Park. And I'm going to do my login. Oh, of course, I don't have my phone. One moment. Okay, now that I have my phone, logging in. Okay, so now what I want to do is do my pickup location as UMCP curbside pickup. So once I hit next, which I'm not going to do because I'm actually not going to go pick up this book, but what I would do is hit next. This will put in my request. I'll then get that follow-up that I mentioned earlier, asking when I want to come in to pick up my material, and I let them know when I want to come in. Okay, so that's the basic idea of how to get those materials. Okay. Now, if I go back, I can narrow down to a number of things. I think one thing it's bothering me as I'm looking at these results, I think one thing I might want to do is I might want to take out this keyword of pirate. I'm going to try this again. Much better. Okay. For some reason, the term pirate, I guess, means more like little kids stuff. I don't know. Not entirely sure what that's about. But here we are. Now we're in much better sources here. You'll come across instances like that where some word is kind of tripping up your search. Your solution there is to try to work backwards and to figure out what is going wrong in here. Oftentimes, if you have too long of a search string, you'll find that you have entered into some weird territory, like we just did there. So hopefully that's a little helpful, actually, to kind of see how to back out from some of the bad searches. Okay, now moving on. So we found this book. This looks good. Wow, here's some really good looking articles. These happen to be the same two articles, but we see a lot about analysis of Somali fishermen and piracy. This all looks really good here. So I'm going to look at this article first. This comes from Fisheries Research, which that's a little bit of a strange source, but we can see this might be interesting. Okay, so we see it comes from our databases. So I go to full text, and here we go. So many pop-ups, my goodness. Okay, so then we can get straight into this article, download PDF, all of this. You're most likely familiar with how to do a lot of this. If you're not, if you need help, please let me know or let one of my colleagues know about that. We're happy to help, but I don't want to hover too much on that. Okay, so I want to get to one of the things here that we can do, which is to narrow down your search. So we did this search, it's pretty big. We got 73 results. That's not too bad as search goes. But let's say I want to narrow much closer into just articles. I can just click this button here, article, and it will narrow my searches down to just articles. Here we go. This one looks really good. And it's from Ocean Development and International Law. Cool. Okay, so then this comes from, awesome. Okay, so this one looks really good. This is more or less what I was thinking when I was thinking about this. And you'll see this ecosystem looks a lot like this. Now, for most articles, they'll have this PDF full text button here. If it doesn't have that, it'll have something that either looks like it and it says like linked full text. And that means that we have the full text. It's just in a different database. Or you'll see this one that says find at UMD. And if you click that button, this will give you a shortcut to interlibrary loan. So we happen to have it, but if we didn't, a little button would pop up here that said, request their interlibrary loan. But this one looks pretty interesting. And so I'm going to actually download this one myself. But one of the keys to doing good research with this is to also make sure to not just get locked into specific phrases. So if I do another search in the same lines, so I did the subject as Somalia and piracy and so on and so forth. If I want to just do another search just as a keyword of Somali pirates, you'll see that I do end up getting different results. So it is worth being a bit nimble and thinking about the way that you're searching and the words that you're using. This also actually gives me a chance to show you how to access the ebooks as well. So if I click on, before we did the requesting by clicking on here and doing the little form. If I want to look at this one, I click the View ebook button. And for this particular one, we're in this system, and the way you do it is to just view PDF full text like that. And then once you're in here, you have access to the book, and you can actually download individual chapters and things. You can read through it if just by clicking on each chapter and reading through. And you can also download chapters. It doesn't allow you to download the full chapter or the full book all at once. So you do have to kind of work through it that way. But if you're reading for research, you may not need to read the entire book anyway. Okay, and then the last thing I want to show is just how to use some of the general use databases. That'll be helpful for finding a lot of information quickly, and they give you kind of like a search in this system, a sort of general overview, as opposed to a very niche place to look. And I know I was talking up the niche places to look, but I would say that's more of like a second stage or third stage in your search process. We're still kind of focusing on the first step here because it's early in the semester. So if I go to JSTOR, a lot of you will be familiar with JSTOR, I'm sure, from other classes or from high school and so on and so forth. But if I click into JSTOR and I look up something like Somali pirates, it'll allow me to do some of the things like we do in the advanced searching just from here, but I'm going to keep this at the keyword search for the moment here. So I'm going to do Somali pirates. Oh, yes. So this has a lot of good stuff right off the bat. I've seen some cool stuff. And in particular, I got excited when I see this open access button here with some of these books and things. These make me happy. Yeah, this is from a big report. So we have, ooh, cool. Right, so this helped us find some really good stuff here that we can piece through, and you'll see a number of things in here. And JSTOR is really good because it'll have some open access books here. So if we look here, some open access books that it has. Let's see what they have. Varied success there, but a lot of articles that come from pretty much every different discipline. I love JSTOR; it's my favorite, but that's neither here nor there. And it'll allow you to kind of dig into a lot of really cool stuff. Okay. I know that was kind of a lot to go through all of that today. So please let me know if you have any questions, problems as you're working on all of this. Please send me an email. Again, my email is jsly@umd.edu, or you're more than welcome to go through the schedule a consultation thing and just sit and meet with me. Happy to go through all this kind of with your own topic to kind of help develop it and build it into something interesting and good. And as you can see in our example, we really took a sort of very broad topic, hardly an idea, and turned it into something very interesting and kind of exciting to find. So I hope that the same can go for you with your research, and please let me know. I mean, I'm here to help, and I hope that you get as excited about some of this as I clearly did. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you have a good semester. Please reach out to me. I'm here to help, and I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.